So in March of this year, Jimmy Kimmel discussed that he'd lost 25 pounds by following this trendy diet. The trendy diet is the 5-2 diet. You 2 days a week, you go down to 500 or 600 calories, and then you eat your normal way the other 5 days of the week. I believe he said he's doing it on Monday and Tuesday. Most people that you talk to, and I've got several patients that heard about this and have been following it successfully. Most people pick Monday and Tuesday because the weekend's over, you don't have all those social activities, and you can buckle down for a couple of days and watch your diet. Now, they mentioned it's a trendy diet, but their question is it safe? I've got a slightly different question. There are tons of diets, fasting-related diets, fasting mimicking diet, fasting diet, fat fast, water fast, juice fast, you name it. And I've been starting to dig into the science behind these and getting into some details. That's what I'm going to do on this diet today. Dig a little bit deeper into the science. But first, it's really hitting the airstreams. There's I think this is a politician in England, George Osborne, who talked about losing weight on it. Beyonce has used it and said she did great with it. She's also used some other ones like the lemon ginger something else cleansing diet. But again, she said she got great results with the 5-2 diet. Now, this diet was first made, it made headlines when a fellow in England, Dr. Michael Mosley, put that 5-2 diet out there. It's the fast diet. That's what they call it. He's sold, several million copies of this book. So again, is it worth it? What's the science? Believe it or not, there is science. And I'll get into that in just a minute. But first, my name is Ford Brewer, F-O-R-D Brewer, B-R-E-W-E-R. I'm a physician. My first job was in the emergency department. Way too much preventable death, disease, disability being brought into the door by ER patients. I got very passionate about prevention. I went to one of the best places to learn at that point, and now too, Johns Hopkins. Loved it, did well, ended up running the program teaching docs how to do prevention. In the 3 decades plus, yes, I'm old, I'm 61 now, I've been teaching docs, primary care docs, and patients how to prevent disease rather than just wait till it happens and try to fix it. That my grandma used to call that closing the barn door after the horse was out. Anyway, so this channel is a way of making this available to the public and raising some interest and focus on prevention. Now, a major part of prevention is diet, and in fact, probably clearly the most important part of prevention is lifestyle. It's probably 2 or 3 times more important than supplements or medications or procedures. And by far the most important part of lifestyle, no, it's not exercise, it's diet. Exercise is very important, but not as important as diet. This is the book that we mentioned a few minutes ago, Michael Mosley. And this is another version of his book cover, The 5-2 Fast Diet. Now, here's the title page for the article that actually went into this. This article was done in 2011. I did another small series of videos on time-restricted fasting, circadian rhythm diet. And in that, science. It was a Science Review article. It was written by two guys. You may know the names. Sachin Panda, who's at the Salk Institute. He's a circadian rhythm scientist. A lot of stuff going on in circadian rhythm. The three Americans won the Nobel Prize for finding the gene that turns on and off and directs the circadian rhythm in humans. Sachin Panda is very involved in that, and he's written a book called Circadian Code. His co-author was Dr. Valter Longo. Most people watching this channel have heard that name, Valter Longo. He developed Prolon, Prolon. It's the mimicked fasting diet. And those guys, when they were doing this science review, one of the articles that they mentioned, was this article by Michelle Harvey and her team, and associates. This was published in the International Journal of Obesity, based in London in 2011. And here's what they're talking about. The effects of intermittent or continuous energy restriction. That's what they called it in England at the time. Basically what that means is, in today's vernacular, if you listen to fasting and you're up on it, one of the things they talk about is calorie restriction. That would be the second one. CER is what they're calling it, continuous energy restriction. The other thing that this is called, intermittent energy restriction is what they called it. And again, we call it IF now, intermittent fasting. And how do I know it's 5-2? Well, we'll get to that in just a minute. But they did a randomized clinical trial in young overweight women. The objective, compare the feasibility and effectiveness of IER, or intermittent energy restriction, to continuous energy restriction for weight loss, insulin sensitivity, and other metabolic disease risk factors. Now, here was the design. They basically did a 25% energy restriction. They did it two ways. Intermittent energy restriction for 2 days a week. So you wanted to know how I knew that was the 5-2 diet? That's it right there. 2 days a week, they took out that 25% of their energy restriction. For the other group, they did continuous energy restriction, and within the group, over the entire 7 days. The group was 107 overweight or obese premenopausal women for over 6 months. They did weight anthropometry, looked at waist and other measurements, biomarkers for breast cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and dementia risk. This was a very, very comprehensive study. Insulin resistance using the homa-ir method, oxidative stress markers, leptin, adiponectin, insulin-like growth factors 1 and 2, IGF binding proteins 1 and 2, androgen, prolactin, inflammatory markers, HSCRP, C-reactive protein, lipids, blood pressure, brain-derived BD neurotrophic factor. And they did this all at baseline, at 1 month, at 3 months, and 6 months. Here's what they found. The weight change was actually, they lost a little bit more weight on the intermittent restriction than they did on the continuous restriction. 6.4 kilograms versus 5.6 kilograms. You say, well, that's not that much. The p-value, when you look at it, was less than 5%. So the probability of that happening at random was less than 1 in 20, which is the cut point for most medical research. Both groups experienced comparable reductions in all of these indicators. I'm not going to list them all again. The reductions in fasting insulin and insulin resistance were modest in both groups, but again, greater in the intermittent energy restriction or intermittent fasting group, the 5-2 group, than in continuous restriction. So their conclusion was the intermittent restriction is just as effective and maybe an option for people. Now let's take a look a little bit at the images that we see here. This shows you with weight. Yes, the square one is the intermittent, and it was significantly lower throughout the study. Body fat was significantly lower throughout the study. Waist was significantly lower throughout the study. And guess what? If you see all that, it's not a surprise that insulin sensitivity had improved significantly better. So interesting results there, and interesting impact on the science. I'll just cover a couple of other things. I've already covered the majority of it. These next couple of pages, next few points, basically have to do, for the geeks that want to make sure that baselines were average and comparable. They did an appropriate look at insulin sensitivity. Yes, they did that with homa-ir. And here's, again, the key couple of things that they found. It's suggestive that severe restriction may have different effects, which are more important for long-term disease prevention. In other words, this cycling may be better than consistent caloric restriction. IER was no easier, the intermittent was no easier to maintain than the continuous, and particularly in the long term. Ease of following the diets varied, as you can guess, between individuals. The best diet, it's like Jenny Rule said, the best diet is the diet that you can maintain 6 months and beyond. Thank you for your interest.